Snow fell in heavy, swirling sheets over Redwood Hollow, the kind of winter storm that made even the bravest rancher hurry home before the roads vanished beneath white drifts. Christmas Eve should have been a night of warmth, families gathered around glowing hearths. Lanterns hung in windows, voices lifted in carols, but for Elena, stumbling down the icy road with numb fingers and trembling legs, it felt like the loneliest night of her life. Her coat was thin, barely more than a faded scrap of wool, and the wind cut through it as though it weren't there at all. Her shoes, once sturdy, were cracked at the soles, letting snow seep into her stockings until her feet burned with cold. She wrapped her arms around herself, holding in what little warmth she had left, but her breath still fogged in quick, uneven puffs. She had been walking for hours, ever since she was forced off the stagecoach at the last stop. Too poor to pay for the rest of the fare, Redwood Hollow was supposed to be a temporary stop, a place to rest before continuing west toward the promise of work, but the universe had offered little mercy. First, her small bag was stolen. Then, when she sought help at the town's inn, the owner looked at her ragged clothes and turned her away with a curt shake of his head. Even the church was locked for the night, its pastor called away to help a family on the far edge of town. Every house Elena passed seemed to glow with warmth, golden lamplight, silhouettes of families gathered together, children laughing as they prepared for the next morning's excitement. Each window reminded her of everything she didn't have: no family, no home, no one waiting for her. And as the wind picked up, biting and relentless, she wondered if she would survive the night. Her lips trembled, not from the cold alone, but from exhaustion and fear. Please, she thought, though she didn't know who she was begging. Just one door, one chance, but every door she knocked on only brought silence, or worse, a face peering out with suspicion. Before closing the curtains again, the world felt harsh and uncaring until a faint, warm glow appeared through the curtain of snow. A small house sat at the end of the lane, its chimney puffing smoke into the dark sky. Lanterns shimmered in the windows, and outside, she could hear the faint sound of a child's laughter. Something about it softened her fear just enough to let her take one more step, and then another. By the time she reached the porch, Elena could barely lift her hand to knock. Her knuckles brushed the wood. Weak and hesitant, but it was enough. The door opened a moment later, revealing Luke Carter, a tall, broad-shouldered man with tired eyes and a wary gaze. He had a dish towel over his shoulder, as though he'd been in the middle of preparing dinner. Behind him, the fire crackled softly. He took in her soaked clothes, her shaking limbs, the snow clinging to her hair. He didn't say a word at first, and for a terrible moment, Elena feared he would shut the door just like all the others. But then, a small voice broke the silence. "Daddy." "Who is she?" A little girl with soft golden curls peered up at her father, her eyes full of curiosity rather than fear. Elena felt her heart twist, not with envy, but with longing. Luke exhaled slowly, his expression shifting. The storm roared behind her, but inside the doorway, the warmth of the home spilled out like a lifeline. And for the first time that night, Elena dared to hope. As Elena warmed herself near the crackling fire, Luke Carter moved quietly around the kitchen, his thoughts heavier than the winter storm raging outside. From the outside, he looked calm, steady-handed, composed, the kind of man who could carry an entire ranch on his shoulders without flinching. But inside, the weight he bore never loosened. Not even for a moment. Single fatherhood was not a role he had chosen. It was one he had inherited overnight 2 years ago. He had held his wife's hand as illness stole her breath, leaving him with a baby girl and a grief so large it nearly swallowed him whole. Since then, every day had been a push against exhaustion. Every night was a battle against loneliness, and every Christmas Eve was a reminder of what and whom he'd lost. As he glanced toward Elena, still wrapped in the wool blanket, he felt a flicker of discomfort, not because she was a stranger, but because her presence awakened something in him he had long buried, the instinct to protect, to care, to feel sympathy and warmth for someone outside. The small world he had forced himself to live in Abigail tugged on his sleeve. "Daddy, is she gonna stay?" Luke crouched down beside her, smoothing her soft blonde curls. "Just for tonight." "Sweetheart, she needs a safe place until the storm passes." "But she looks sad," Abigail whispered, her little voice filled with concern only a child could carry. "Like how you looked after Mama went to heaven." Luke froze. Children had a way of speaking truths adults avoided. He swallowed hard. "That's why we help people when they're hurting, Abby, because we know how it feels." The little girl nodded and scampered off toward the living room, humming softly as she began rearranging ornaments on their small Christmas tree. Luke's gaze followed her, and a familiar ache tightened inside his chest. He wanted to give Abigail everything: a stable home, safety, warmth, and the kind of childhood her mother had dreamed of. But raising her alone meant sacrifices. He had put aside his own dreams, his own desires, his own chance at companionship. Every ranch chore, every school morning, every bedtime story, he did it all alone, often bone-tired, often overwhelmed. Sometimes he wondered if he was enough. Sometimes he feared that loving his daughter wasn't the same as giving her the life she deserved. And now, with a stranger sitting by his fire, he felt those insecurities return like ghosts. Elena was clearly exhausted, fragile even when she lifted her cup of tea with trembling hands. Luke noticed the rawness in her skin, the hunger in her eyes. She'd seen hardship, real hardship, and despite the chill in her clothes, he sensed warmth in her spirit, a kindness that had survived whatever losses had driven her to wander through a storm. He found himself watching her longer than he meant to, not with desire, but with concern, with recognition. New loss. Abigail skipped back to the hearth and sat beside Elena. "Miss Elena, do you like Christmas?" Elena hesitated. "I used to." The pause was small, but Luke caught it. She didn't have to finish the sentence. He knew what it meant to avoid holidays because they hurt more than they healed. Luke cleared his throat, pushing away the tightening in his chest. "Abigail, why don't you show her the snow globe you made?" His daughter jumped up eagerly and ran to fetch it. Elena smiled faintly. Luke noticed how that small expression seemed both beautiful and painful, like she wasn't used to smiling anymore. For a moment, Luke leaned against the doorway, absorbing the quiet scene before him, the firelight, his daughter's soft laughter, the woman who had stumbled into their lives like a lost bird seeking shelter. And he felt again the burden he carried, not just of being father and mother, but of being the only protector of this fragile little world. That burden was heavy, but tonight, strangely, it felt a little less lonely. The storm outside roared with an almost vindictive fury, but inside Luke Carter's cabin, the world felt strangely calm. Snow slapped against the windows and wind howled down from the ridge. Yet the hearth glowed with steady light, casting soft gold across the wooden walls. The Christmas tree and the tired stranger who had stumbled in from the cold. Elena sat nearest to the fire, wrapped tightly in Luke's wool blanket. Heat rushed back into her body in prickling waves, painful at first, then soothing. She closed her eyes briefly, as if afraid the comfort might disappear if she looked directly at it. Luke watched her from the kitchen doorway, his arms crossed loosely, not with suspicion anymore, but with something gentler, an unspoken concern. He tried to hide beneath his worn rancher's composure. He had opened his door out of compassion, but the feeling that now unfolded in his chest was deeper than duty. Something about her quiet presence tugged at a place he had kept locked away since his wife died. He cleared his throat, breaking the silence. "Fire warm enough?" Elena nodded, pulling the blanket closer. "It's perfect." "Thank you." Luke gave a small nod and returned to the stove, where he reheated the leftover stew. The savory smell filled the room, and Elena breathed it in like she was inhaling life itself. Abigail, who had been silently studying Elena from her spot near the Christmas tree, Finally approached with all the boldness of a curious 6-year-old Miss Elena, she said, clutching a wooden toy horse, "Do you like stories?" Elena blinked in surprise. "Stories?" "Uh-huh." Abigail plopped down beside her. "Daddy tells me one every night, but maybe you know some too." Luke nearly tripped over his own boots when he heard that his daughter had not asked anyone besides him to tell a story since her mother's passing. For her to warm to a stranger this quickly meant something. Luke didn't quite know how to process. Elena smiled softly, the expression bringing unexpected brightness to her tired face. "I know one," she said gently. "It's about a girl who found a home when she least expected to." Abigail's eyes widened. "Is it true?" Elena paused. "Parts of it." Luke felt something in his chest shift. As if the warmth of the fire had seeped inside him too, he brought a bowl of stew and a warm slice of bread to her. He said, "You look like you haven't had a real meal in days." She hesitated, then whispered, I haven't." The simplicity of the confession struck him with quiet force. No demands, no dramatics, just truth raw and small. Elena took her first spoonful, and her eyes glazed with gratitude she tried to hide. Abigail leaned closer. "Is it good?" "It's wonderful," Elena said, voice trembling. Luke turned away, pretending to adjust the pot so she wouldn't see the emotion that tightened his throat as she ate. He sat nearby, not quite close enough to intrude, but not far enough to be distant. Abigail curled up against his side, yawning, the firelight dancing across her sleepy face. The warmth in the cabin grew richer, no longer simply heat from the crackling logs, but the warmth of connection, unexpected yet welcome for months. Luke's home had been filled with silence, broken only by chores and Abigail's small laughter, but now, with Elena's soft voice mingling with the sounds of the fire and the storm outside, the cabin suddenly felt fuller, more alive. Luke didn't understand it, but he felt a presence he hadn't known. He needed a reminder that kindness wasn't dangerous, a whisper of hope. Settling into the cracks grief had left behind, Elena, who had walked into his home shivering and alone, now sat in the heart of it, bathed in warmth, welcomed by a child's trust, and slowly thawing from more than just the cold. And as Luke watched her talk softly to Abigail, his heart admitted what his mind could not. This woman, this stranger, felt like the first miracle his Christmas had seen in years. The storm finally quieted sometime near dawn. When the first pale light crept through the frosted windows, the Carter cabin felt wrapped in a hush so soft it seemed sacred. Snow blanketed the world outside, smoothing every rough edge, covering every hardship in pure white inside. The fire had smoldered to a gentle glow, radiating just enough warmth to make waking up feel like drifting out of a dream. Elena opened her eyes slowly, blinking as she realized she was still wrapped in Luke's wool blanket on the couch. For the first time in months, she had slept deeply, without fear, without cold, without the ache of loneliness. Gnawing at her rib cage, the soft crackle of embers and the faint scent of pine from the Christmas tree greeted her like a lullaby lingering in the air. Then she heard small footsteps. Abigail tiptoed into the room, her hair tousled and her pajamas wrinkled from sleep. When she saw Elena awake, her face lit up like a lantern. "Merry Christmas," the little girl whispered loudly, clutching a tiny stocking in her hands. Elena sat up, stunned. "It's Christmas already?" Abigail nodded excitedly. "Daddy says Christmas morning is magic, and this year's extra special 'cause you're here." The words hit Elena with an unexpected swell of emotion. She had expected this holiday to be another reminder of everything she'd lost. Instead, she was being included, welcomed, celebrated. Luke appeared moments later, carrying 2 mugs of steaming cocoa, one small, one generous. He looked a little sleep-ruffled, softer around the edges in the morning light. "Merry Christmas," he said quietly, offering her the larger mug. "Thought you might like something warm." Elena accepted it with both hands. letting the heat seep into her fingers. "Thank you for everything." Luke shook his head. "You don't need to thank me. You were in trouble. Anyone would have done the same." But she knew that wasn't true. Many doors would have stayed closed. Many hearts would have looked away. Luke Carter had opened both. Abigail tugged Elena's sleeve. "Come sit by the tree. Daddy says we can start with the small gifts." Elena hesitated. "Oh, sweetheart, I didn't bring anything for." Abigail pressed a wrapped package into her lap before she could finish. The paper was lumpy and uneven, taped too many times. The shape indiscernible, but the joy in the child's eyes made it the most perfect gift she had ever received. "I made it," Abigail announced proudly, "with lots of glue." Luke chuckled from behind her. "She means too much glue." Elena carefully unwrapped the bundle, revealing a small wooden ornament shaped like a heart. Abigail had painted it red mostly inside the lines and etched the word "Hope" across the front in wobbly letters, and something inside Elena cracked. Open not with pain, with warmth no one had given her a gift since her husband died. No one had made her feel seen, wanted, or welcome, but here, in a cabin she hadn't known existed yesterday, a little girl had handed her the first piece of Christmas she had felt in years. I love it," Elena whispered, her voice breaking. Abigail squealed and threw her arms around her neck. Elena hugged her tightly, burying her face in the child's shoulder as tears stung her eyes. Luke watched them with a softness that surprised him. He hadn't expected his home, once heavy with memories, to feel so full again, seeing Elena there, holding his daughter, laughing through her tears. Something in him shifted, something long dormant stirred awake. Breakfast became a small celebration. Warm biscuits, fresh butter, and the last jar of honey saved for special days. Elena helped set the table. Moving as though she had belonged there for years, Abigail danced around the cabin, humming Christmas tunes off key. And Luke? He felt peace, real peace, for the first time in 2 long years. Christmas morning didn't hurt, it felt like a beginning. Christmas morning had barely settled into quiet when a sharp, unexpected knock shattered the peaceful hum of Daniel's cabin. The warm glow from the hearth, the scent of pine needles, and the gentle laughter from moments earlier seemed to freeze in the air. Daniel turned toward the door with a frown. No one ever visited this far out in the hills. His hand instinctively went to Emma's shoulder, steadying her as she stiffened, her face draining of color. The knock came again, this time louder, more insistent. Emma whispered, barely audible, "It's them." Daniel didn't know who them was, but the fear in her eyes told him enough. Whoever stood outside was the very reason she had run through the freezing night and collapsed in his barn. He lowered himself slightly to meet her gaze. "You're safe here," he murmured firmly. "I won't let anything happen to you." Another knock followed by a man's voice. "Emma, we know you're in there. Open this door." Daniel's jaw clenched. Whoever this man was, he spoke with a tone dripping with ownership, not concern. Daniel's instincts as a father and as someone who had spent years protecting his son kicked in. He stepped toward the door but didn't open it yet. "Who are you?" he called through the wood. The voice on the other side scoffed. "Her fiancé stole from us and ran. She has something that belongs to me." Behind Daniel, Emma shook her head violently. "I never stole anything," she whispered. "He's lying. I was supposed to marry him because my aunt arranged it, but I found out. He wasn't buying a wife, he was buying property. Me?" Daniel took a breath, letting her words settle in his chest like burning coals. He had seen men like this before, using money and power to press down on those too vulnerable to fight back, and he could tell from Emma's trembling hands that this wasn't a misunderstanding, this was escape. Daniel unlatched the door, but only enough to step outside. Blocking the entrance with his broad shoulders, a well-dressed man stood in the snow, flanked by 2 others. His coat was fine wool, his gloves expensive, and a smugness clung to him like a stain. "Move aside," the man said. "She's coming back with me." Daniel didn't threaten. He didn't yell. He simply stood tall. His voice low and even. "She's not property, and she's not going anywhere she doesn't choose to." The man's eyes narrowed. "You're a single father in a broken cabin. Don't make this difficult." Daniel leaned forward, meeting his gaze without blinking. "I've survived storms tougher than you." Inside the cabin, Emma grabbed little Noah, clutching him tightly as tears pricked her eyes. It wasn't fear alone, it was guilt. She had brought danger to this quiet home, to this child who had hugged her so openly, and to the man who had shown her nothing but kindness outside. The tension grew. The man reached inside his coat, pulling out papers. "A contract," he said, "signed by her family, legal and binding." Daniel didn't look at the papers. Instead, he spoke clearly. "Contracts don't override a woman's safety or her freedom." The man stepped closer. "Then I'll take her by force." Daniel shifted his stance, planting his boots in the snow. "No, you won't." Something in Daniel's certainty, solid as the mountains behind him, made the men hesitate. The leader's confidence wavered. He wasn't used to being challenged, especially not by a simple rancher who looked ready to face down a blizzard just to protect a stranger. Finally, the man spat at the snow. "This isn't over." He turned, signaling his men, and the three disappeared into the trees. Daniel remained outside until he was sure they were gone, when he stepped back inside. Emma flew into him, shaking. "I'm sorry," she cried. "I didn't want to bring this to your door." Daniel wrapped his arms around her. "Steady and warm, Emma," he whispered. "You're not alone anymore." And for the first time that morning, Emma believed it. The cabin felt different after the confrontation, quieter, but not with fear. Instead, the silence carried something gentler, something unspoken but deeply felt. The morning sun filtered through the frosted window panes, casting golden stripes across the wooden floor. Emma sat near the fire, wrapped in one of Daniel's thick blankets, her hands trembling not from cold but from everything that had just happened. Daniel moved quietly around the cabin, checking windows, ensuring the door was bolted, stoking the fire. Not once did he look irritated or burdened. Instead, every movement was calm, purposeful, protective. Emma watched him, and a warmth spread through her chest. Unfamiliar yet comforting, he had stood for her without hesitation. A stranger, a single father with enough worries of his own, yet he had risked everything simply to make sure she was safe. Little Noah toddled over and plopped himself into Emma's lap, his small arms hugging her middle. "Don't cry," he whispered, wiping her cheek with his tiny thumb. "Daddy keeps people safe." Emma's breath caught at the innocence in his voice. "Yes," she said softly, her voice cracking. "Yes, he does." Daniel finally sat across from her, leaning forward with his arms resting on his knees. "They won't come back," he assured gently. "Men like that depend on fear. When they don't find it, they get smaller." Emma looked at him with a mixture of gratitude and disbelief. "I don't understand why you helped me," she said. "You didn't even know me." Daniel held her gaze, steady and sincere. "You were cold, alone, hurt, and scared. That was enough." Simple words, but they struck deep. For so long, Emma had been surrounded by people who only wanted something from her. Her aunt wanted money, her supposed fiancé wanted control, but Daniel wanted nothing. He simply gave. He had offered warmth, safety, shelter, and something more precious than all of it, dignity. The fire crackled softly as a moment of ease settled between them. Later, as the day wore on, Daniel took Emma outside to see the snow-covered ridge. The world was bright, sparkling beneath a sky brushed with soft clouds. Noah ran ahead, making small boot prints in the snow. Emma stood beside Daniel, her breath visible in the crisp air. "It's beautiful," she murmured. "It is," Daniel replied, and when Emma looked at him, she realized he wasn't talking about the view. She felt her cheeks warm. "Daniel, I don't know where I'm supposed to go next." He studied her for a long moment, choosing his words with care. "You don't have to decide today," he said. "You've been running so long. Maybe it's time you rested." Emma swallowed hard. "With you?" "If you want," he said quietly. The honesty in his voice disarmed her. There was no pressure, no demand, only an open door she had never expected to find Emma turned toward the trees. Remembering the man who had come for her, the fear was still there. But it no longer held her heart hostage. Daniel had changed something deep inside her simply by standing between her and danger. "I've never had a place that felt safe," she admitted. "Not really." Daniel stepped closer, close enough that she could feel the heat of him even through the winter chill. "Then stay," he whispered, "at least until you find your own path." Her eyes met his, and in them she saw patience, kindness, steadiness, qualities she once believed no man possessed. Noah's laughter echoed behind them, and Emma looked from the child to the father. "Maybe," she said slowly, "maybe I already found it." Daniel's breath caught, his expression softening. "Emma." She smiled, a real smile, full and bright. "I think love arrives when we stop expecting anything good to stay. But sometimes it finds us anyway." Daniel reached for her hand, their fingers intertwining as naturally as if they had always belonged together. In that quiet, snowy landscape, something tender, something new, something beautiful began to grow. Love had arrived, not loud, not demanding, but gently, like a miracle they never saw coming.